Okay, the bell tolls, so let's make a start if you'd like to take your seats. Hang on, I've just got to sort out an awful buzz. Ooh. Right, okay, sorry. Disadvantage of having it on the loop is you sometimes get an awful feedback. Welcome everybody, thanks very much to this Cobtree Committee. I'm Councillor Simon Wales, Chair actually, of the Cobtree Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting. May I take the opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is recording or intending to record, would they please let us know now? I ask this question not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Good, they're all obeying. Item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? No, I can see everybody there. There are no substitutes for that very same reason. Urgent items. I intend to take the appendices to item 13, Cobtree Manor Estate Annual Accounts 23-24 as urgent updates. Appendix 2, the letter of representation was not available at the time of publication, and appendices 1 and 3 have been updated with additional information. The updated appendices were made available online yesterday, and paper copies have been circulated today. Is this agreed, colleagues? Thank you very much. Item 4, the notification of visiting members. Doesn't look like it. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? If you have anything, speak now. Yes, Councillor Cox.
I'm connected with a community interest company that's benefited from grants from the Cobtree Trust and may do again in the future.
Thank you very much. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? Not on these items today, this meeting, I wouldn't have thought. Okay, thank you. To consider whether any items should be taken in private, I move that all the items are taken in public. Is that agreed? Item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of October. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of October 24 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Where am I signing these? Each page.
It's on the corner, you can do it now or at the end if you wanted to.
Okay, I'll just whiz through that now. No. There we go. Out of the way. Fine. Presentation of petitions. There are no petitions this evening. Item 10, question and answer session for members of the public. There don't seem to be flocking here, so there are no questions. Item 11, questions from members to the chair. There are no questions. Item 12, there we are, quickly, how fast do we get through these? Cobtree Estate Update. To be introduced by Mike Evans, Leisure Contract Manager. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. So the estate update features or includes details mainly from Q3. It's as per the papers, but a couple of aspects to draw the committee's attention to. Car park numbers continue to be around 10% down, which is the same as we've seen for Q2 and Q1 and for the year in total. We have investigated the enforceability to see if there were any issues with ticketing, and that was deterring people from paying. But there's been no changes or anomalies there that would account for people not buying tickets. We have seen a slight uptick in the number of permits sold to the public. So that could account for more people using the permit route and not buying tickets day by day. And we do know that once people buy a permit, they tend to stick with it because of the exceptional value for money that it offers. The cafe refurb has happened, and that's reopened now, and we hope that that will attract more visitors over the winter, and then we can monitor in Q1 of next financial year where the car park numbers are at. The play area is reaching the end of its life, and proactively Mr. Holland and I are taking steps to embark on plans for its replacement, or investigate that replacement. Provision's been made in the capital programme for next year, which is the later agenda item. On the golf course, we can see that numbers continue to be high, which is pleasing. And following the minutes of the last meeting, we've got the details of the water harvesting and irrigation plans from the operator there. And I know Councillor Harwood and I've spoken about this. Again, happy to take any questions if people want to. Kent Life numbers have a slight reduction this quarter, based mainly on the number of weekends that was available for the Santa's Grotto. Overall, they're 4% decrease on last year, so still trading quite nicely at Kent Life. Yeah, as always, happy to take any questions on any aspects.
Thank you very much. It's a shame that Ken Life are blaming Santa Claus for their demise, but the shortfall in numbers. Councillor Harwood.
Thank you, Chairman. And as was mentioned, there's been some discussion outside of the meeting and some correspondence around the potential for some tweaks to management and perhaps some enhancements in terms of ponds and so on the site, so that we can maximise landscape and biodiversity benefits. So we get I think that can only help with the kind of visitor challenge that has been presented, and also in terms of the aesthetics of the golf course. And I think from the discussion earlier on, I think that the key issue in terms of looking at the ponds and so on is on the golf course. I think where it comes to sward management, around the fact that there's quite a lot of mown grass where we could have a little bit more floristic richness and a little bit more structure, that tends to be within the park proper, particularly around the ecotone between the wooded areas and the open grassland areas. And I think it would be very nice to perhaps have a walk round with the company ecologist at the golf course to see what enhancements can be made, particularly around the water features, but also elsewhere potentially. And then on the park itself, it would be nice just to make sure that those tweaks that I know have already been discussed around grassland management, so that we've got more kind of conservation cut areas and so on, just to make sure that that is fully understood by those who are actually out there on the coalface cutting the grass and things, and also looking at the timings, because I think sometimes we leave it longer in the summer and then we whack it all down in the winter just when everything's hibernating in it or whatever, which isn't good if you're a slow worm being kind of finely sliced. So I think we'll take that outside of the meeting, but I think it can only bring kind of holistic benefits for all round, for attractiveness of the site and for all of its visitors, with however many legs or none.
Thanks. Yes, I appreciate that, and I think it's good that land which is under council control is being seen as an example of good practice. And I think what I'd like to propose is that we have the estate management plan on the next agenda, possibly after we've had a walk round with you and the people who understand these things, the ecologists. But there's many of us who are able to make it, but I'd certainly like to be there as well, just to see what we could do to enhance that. So if we could add that as another recommendation, that we have that at the next meeting. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, just a very quick point. In terms of the gritty thing at the start, under biodiversity and climate change, it does say there are no implications within the report. If it could just say there are lots and see the report, because clearly there are, it just kind of, there's a bit of a mismatch. It would be useful not to, because I do read those. Thank you.
Yes, I think the report itself is very, very helpful and easily understood, and nice table layout of the figures. The car park vehicle visits are always going to be a tricky thing, aren't they? Because we can't enforce. We're relying on people being honest and buying a ticket, or even if we put wardens in there, they sit or just sit in the cafe and quickly buy a ticket on Ringo when they see the warden turn up. I don't know what the answers are, because obviously we can't do NPR stuff on council car parks. So do we have any views of how that can be improved? I'll ask Mike first.
Thank you, Chair. In previous discussions with colleagues in parking services, we are limited to what methods we can employ because it's a council-run car park. That's always been their feedback to me in terms of ANPR and automatic ticketing and things like that you've mentioned.
Yes, because we have no idea if actual numbers are relate anything like the ticket numbers. Councillor Cox.
Thank you. So the only way I can think that we could monitor that is if there's any way we can get hold of, and obviously on a benign basis, the cafe revenue totals, because there's bound to be some correlation between what they sell. There's going to be noise, but some correlation between their income and car parking ratios. And if we're seeing their income going up, but ours is flatlining or sort of heading down, then there's something more that we haven't yet sort of found, but is going on. So yeah, and they should be able to do that through their till system in terms of number of sales. Doesn't necessarily have to be on volume of on value of sales, but it's just that.
I mean, we can take circumstantial evidence of how many more people you see around in the park or in the cafe, and if the number of bikes in the car park doesn't go up, it makes you wonder how they're getting there. Yeah, okay, it might be worth pursuing that. Thank you. Are there any other comments on this report? Mr. Evans, no. So we come to the recommendations now. 3, that the estate update be noted, that the play area improvements project be added to the forward plan, and that the management plan is brought to the next meeting. Oh, and
sorry, just to thank you and all of the teams for what you've delivered on the golf course with the new tenant. You know, those numbers are really showing, and everything you said I think is looking like it's coming into play, no pun intended. So well done, thank you.
yes, Councillor Howard.
Yeah, I wondered whether we've talked about bringing the management plan, looking at that. I'm wondering whether we should have another recommendation saying that you know, that all stakeholders are going to have a look at their current kind of activity and actions to see if there are ways to enhance landscape and biodiversity going forward. Just a way of making it a golden thread running through everything, so that, you know, when all, you know, kind of all the partners are involved in this are kind of looking at their plans and things, they can just think a little bit about, can we make a small change here, or can we do something slightly different which will you know, make the site more hospitable to wildlife, because I think that really does help with things like the perception of the visitors and the feeling of and the numbers that will go along. So I think it could only be positive. I just, you know, if some form of wording can be come up with, I think that would help.
And you have some form of wording, or has Stuart managed to get something out of that?
Thank you. I just want to clarify on stakeholders. So I've got the all stakeholders to review their activities to enhance landscaping and biodiversity.
To enhance landscape and biodiversity benefits going forward, perhaps something like that. So that all of the stakeholders involved with Cobtree look at their procedures and activities going forward, and then the section in there about, and perhaps to say to make 2025 to give a real focus in 2025 on enhancing biodiversity at Cobtree.
Okay.
But it's somewhat encouraging that the golf course contractors are already talking about that in terms of the ponds and things, and taking less water from the mains and what have you. Because a golf course by its very nature tends to rely on fairly short cut grass, so a lot of that is going to have to be quite short, but there are plenty of spaces around it. When you go off, no, not off piste, what I mean off the fairway rather. In the rough, that's the word. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. It's a long time since I played. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So is that agreed from that last point from Councillor Harwood? Thank you. So we move on to the next item then, item 13, which is the accounts, and we turn to Paul Holland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for taking the updated appendices as an urgent item. Just a brief explanation as to why they weren't available when the original agenda was issued. So during their final review stage, the auditors decided to make a small adjustment to the golf course income. Mike and I had a meeting with them just to clarify a couple of points around the contract. And during that meeting, the subject of gift aid came up, as obviously that's something that's new that we're getting. We explained the arrangement to them, and sort of having given it some consideration, they actually raised an issue around whether we were actually eligible to claim gift aid. The reason behind this is that Cobtree isn't in direct receipt of the admission income. Rather, we make the claim using income figures from Kent Life, and that may be a problem because based on their understanding of gift aid rules, you have to be the body receiving the income to make the claim. So what they've suggested is that we seek some clarification to make sure we are actually eligible. My colleague in the finance team who set up the arrangement with HMRC is actually on leave at the moment, so unfortunately we weren't able to clarify with him what he'd explained to them in terms of the arrangement, but he's back next week. In the meantime, Mike did have a conversation with Planning Solutions, as they do have similar arrangements for gift aid at a couple of other sites they operate. And based on that conversation, it looks like there might be a different approach that we could take that would allow us to claim for gift aid. So we'll follow up on that. So that's why the appendices needed to be updated to reflect the golf course income, which was a relatively minor change, and the gift aid position. So what I'll do, I'll bring an update on the gift aid to the next meeting, and I've said to the chair I'll keep him updated as to the progress of what's going on. But hopefully we can resolve it fairly quickly. So moving on to the accounts document, the updated version now includes the annual report, a couple of new notes and some updates to the wording. In terms of the numbers, they're broadly similar. It just reflects an additional £16,000 worth of golf course income. So I think the key messages are that looking at the balance sheet, the estate's in quite a strong position with £4.2 million worth of assets, including a healthy bank balance of £339,000. Debtors and creditors are quite high, but they were mainly monies owed to or from the council and the various operators of fed up with me talking, obviously. So, right, sorry, where was I? Yes, sorry, I was talking about debtors and creditors. So this is where invoices were raised towards year end, but with one exception, these have all been paid now. And just looking at the statement of financial activities, which is the profit and loss account, there is a small deficit on income and expenditure. Yes.
Testing.
Right, third time lucky. Yes, sorry. So looking at the statement of financial activities, which is the profit and loss account, there is a small deficit on income and expenditure, which was largely down to a reduced level of golf course income. And the value of the charity fund investment and fixed assets are both down slightly. And then there's also the notes. The rest of the document is the notes that support the figures on the balance sheet and in the statement of financial activities, and they just provide some more detail to those figures. And just to briefly summarise the other two documents, you've got the audit findings report. The key point here is the addition of 3 recommendations, 2 of which are around gift aid, and 1 around accounting for golf club in contract income, which is sort of where the additional £16,000 income comes in. It also sets out the adjustments that were made to the accounts during the audit, and other than that, there were no issues of concern raised by the auditors. And finally, there's the letter of representation, which is a document that asks the committee to confirm a number of statements relating to the audit and the information that was supplied to them during the course of the audit. So that concludes my summary. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Cox.
So just on page 4, which which is, hang on, making sure I'm on the right document. I'm on the notes. And we've got a note there that there's amounts owed to Maidstone Council, 68,527 due within a year. Has that been closed off already now?
Yes, that's the final instalment for the car park loan. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Yeah, thank you. We had some discussion, I think at the last meeting, but one, and certainly when we were on the site, around potential for biodiversity net gain on parts of the site. And I know in your update, it kind of suggested it could be looked at, and I know it's been looked at on lots of other borough council proper land. I think in terms of future financial statements, it's quite a good area to get into because it locks in 30 years. So it gives some security against some of the income lines here. So I think possibly kind of that assessment, if it could be carried out kind of sooner rather than later, that is worthwhile because because now there is a market developing, but there's not a lot of land out there. So there's quite it's certainly a kind of seller's market, if you like, and because you're sitting on so much land with potential, I think it will be a real kind of investor save to work with colleagues, perhaps within Maidstone Council, to assess the potential for B&G credits. And then some of those issues we were talking about earlier on, it's funded externally, so we get the benefit for the visitors and for the site, and we also lock in an income. So that was one thing. The other thing, which again, looking at some of the issues around some of the car park income and so on, is I think what is clear with the success of the season tickets is that once people visit the site, they're hooked and they keep coming back. I think what the challenge we get because of the location is, if you like, that kind of more spontaneous kind of passing trade, if you like, because unless it's a kind of lorry or going to the kind of KCC car show rooms, it's not really happening so much. And I do wonder whether there is an opportunity again in a kind of investor save type approach of looking at almost the kind of front of shop, because currently you've got you've got the access road and you've got two bits of mown grass either side, and perhaps it could be made a little bit more enticing. And I always think that the Cobtree coat of arms is really very attractive, and and quite it's kind of the from the turret drakes and so on, it's quite a kind of historic thing. It's carved into the walls and so on. That perhaps if you look in a lot of parishes, they've got the kind of parish coat of arms or whatever as you enter the area. We could almost do more to kind of promote the site in perhaps a classier way on the approaches and so on, if you like, to show that it's not just a play area. Actually, it's a very it's a very historic site and an estate with a record, with a long history, and it may be by just kind of rethinking the promotion, so it's not just a kind of banner on the fence in front of the hedge, but it's something like a proper kind of waymarking posts and things, really promoting that kind of coat of arms and a slightly different ambience that might help with the promotion.
I'm not sure that's really relating to the accounts, but it's a good point. Yeah, but I was thinking perhaps once we are more involved in promoting biodiversity and whatever, then that's the time to put up more signage about the biodiversity and about the estate with the crest and the coat of arms, and just make it more prominent and more obvious what an historic site it is. Councillor Jeffrey, I saw first, and then Councillor Cox.
Thank you. No comments on the report itself. Just in terms of recommendations, perhaps we could just add our thanks to Paul and the team, and obviously the management team that feed into it as well, for keeping us all safe and solvent stuff.
Cox.
I second what Councillor Jeffrey just said, and just picking up on Councillor Harwood's comments. I've been keeping an eye on what's on at Maidstone, no pun again intended. And actually, what's really interesting about January and February, there aren't the classic events that start happening. You know, when the weather warms up and suddenly the whole site's full of a load of listings. So it's free to list. I just wonder if we start the messaging, particularly around the importance of Cobtree in sort of like biodiversity. We put up some obvious things like, you know, whether they're bee nests or bat boxes or whatever they may be, and make it obvious that's what they're there for, because there is sort of like an opportunity to use it as an education site. But yeah, let's start promoting a little bit online, you know, looking for a day out with the kids, see, without getting covered in mud, come to Cobtree, enjoy a coffee, whatever it might be. And then sort of build on that biodiversity theme, as everyone's already discussed very well. Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. Good, good. Right. Who is it who signs off the accounts? I thought it probably was, but no one had mentioned it, so I thought I'd better just check. Yes. Right. Okay. So everybody's happy with for me to sign the accounts. We have 3 recommendations, apart from our thanks to the officers. Is that right? Yes, that's right. The report and financial statement for 23-24 are approved and submitted to the Charity Commission, that the letter of representation is approved, and that the contents of the audit findings report be noted. Are those recommendations? And the thanks to as well, yes. Yeah. Are they all agreed? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 14, the Cobtree Manor Estate financial position. That's back to Mr.
Thank you, Chair. So there are 3 parts to this report. There's the financial position at the end of November. There's an updated cash flow projection and the draft budgets for 2025-26. So I'll just take you through each area in turn, starting with the financial position report. The current position is shown at page 74 on your agenda, with a more detailed breakdown at Appendix 1. Reallocated some of the budgets just to match the income and expenditure to date, but the projected projected deficit of £7,000 remains unchanged. Currently, we're showing a deficit of 13,000 on the operational activities, so it looks like we should come in or around budget by the end of the year. Investment income and bank interest income is up this year, so we've been able to use that to fund some of the one-off costs we've had this year, such as the dilapidation surveys at the golf course and Kent Life, and some emergency tree works we've had to carry out in the park. Appendix 2 is the cash flow projection. Obviously, it should be noted in light of the previous report that this may need to be revised depending on the outcome of the clarification of the gift aid position, but that would only impact on the capital schemes. It's not something we'd propose to use on day-to-day running costs. So we are showing a number of minor schemes plus the new play area to be completed in the next few years. The operational position is improved by the final repayment of the car park resurfacing works loan, which frees up 70,000 a year for other uses. And finally, appendices 3 and 4, we've got the draft budgets for next year. So as I mentioned earlier, that car park loan's been repaid, so that means we're going to have hopefully a surplus of £63,000 next year, and also surpluses going forward. Just a couple of changes to note. We've reduced the car park income budget, as mentioned. Visitor numbers are down. That was set during the pandemic when visitor numbers were higher. And we've also increased the budget for investment interest income. I would say, given the current parking charges were set prior to the pandemic, you may wish to consider if it's appropriate to review them at some point in the future. And the last document is Appendix 4. That's a summary of the charges the council makes to the estate for the various services it provides, such as contract management and finance, etc. So that concludes my summary. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from members? Councillor Cox.
Not a question per se, but I think we should do some benchmarking of the car parking rates versus Moat Park. And I was sitting here wondering in my head if I could remember them off the top of my head. I can't, is the answer. So yeah, and yeah, we should just do some benchmarking and basically think about the propositions that each offer and what represents sort of value for money. I think would be a good exercise.
Okay. And looking at the cross-cutting issues and implications, the biodiversity one this time has a much longer comment. That's all about low emissions and carbon, reducing it, carbon consumption and so on. So they have looked at the reports, but looked at the reports in a different way each time. Any other questions? Going forward on the budget, once I worked out that black is bad and red is good, so I'm now going to have to think of it. Are we happy with that budget then? Councillor Cox, you...
So, just on the new play scheme, because obviously new play schemes become a big attraction. Everyone wants to come and try out the new adventure that brings. When's that due to be completed? Got the new play area, 450,000 external funding, 0.1. Has it already been done? Has that all been done? No. Okay.
No, so to answer that, Councillor Cox, we know that the play area is at the end of its working life, although it remains safe, which is the message for the public day to day. We need to take long-term steps to replace it. So what we're doing here is identifying a sum in the capital programme moving forward based on play schemes we've done elsewhere in the borough. So if the budget's approved and then subject to the gift aid considerations, how quickly we could pay for that player improvement, we would then begin work on a scheme and bring reports to the committee in the new financial year to say, here's the initial scheme, we've now got more accurate costs for it, and then we can produce a tender and look to get the work completed within 25-26 financial year.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. If there are no more questions, then thanks again. We have two recommendations here: that the current financial position and updated cash flow projection be noted, and that the proposed budgets for 25-26 are agreed. Are those both agreed? Noted and agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, so I declare the meeting closed.